I was doing all the right things. I would say I was getting really smart with my mileage, not increasing too quickly, not doing anything risky. I was strength training, doing the PT, and I was getting an injury like every other week, no matter what I did. And instead of IT man syndrome, I found out that I had a bone tumor that was growing on the side of my knee and compressing the IT bands. I still could barely walk. I couldn't make it up the stairs. I just didn't have any answers. Their only response was just stop running. It's not good for you. I saw two more rheumatologists. Finally, the third rheumatologist did an autoimmune panel, and I lit up like a Christmas tree.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Toughest Finish Line podcast with me, Jen Doan. I feel like the weeks are flying by at the moment, and it only feels 2 minutes ago that we shared Bianca's episode, which has had such amazing feedback. And I know the work that she is doing is continuing to impact on races for the better. Our next guest is also aiming to support race development for the better, but in a different way of supporting athletes with medical conditions to access racing. Maggie shares her story so open and honestly on social media, including the highs, but also the lows. And today she talks openly about how multiple autoimmune conditions impact her on a day-to-day basis. So I would like to introduce you to somebody who I've come across on social media, and I was just blown away by her story and so inspired by everything she continues to go through and continues to battle on a daily basis. So I wanted to introduce you to Dr. Maggie Osa. Thank you so much for being here today, Maggie. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me. I really am excited to be here.
Thank you so much for coming on today. And we will go on to your story and all of the challenges that you face on a day-to-day basis. But I really just wanted to start off with how you first got into fitness, because is it right that you were a competitive trail and road runner to start with?
Yeah, so I actually started running later than most people would expect, I think. I
Mhm.
didn't run in high school or college. I didn't start running until I was 22. So I think I was a bit of a latecomer to the sport than what we typically see on social media, but I fell hard and fast for running. Soccer was really my first love. I
Oh,
played
wow.
midfield growing up, and I don't know why nobody suggested that I might just like the running bit. But so I don't think it's a huge surprise that I fell in love with running. But when I stopped playing soccer, I didn't really know what to do with myself. I knew that I loved sports and I wanted to keep doing them and in a competitive way, but I wasn't really sure what that could look like. I tried just going to the gym and I enjoyed the gym, but it didn't give me the same feeling that soccer gave me, or competing in any sport.
Right.
So almost impulsively, I just decided to try going for a run and seeing how that feels. And I think like the rest is history. I think, a lot of runners, some people, they slowly fall in love with it. For me, it was almost instant. Um, and yeah, I started with just road running, just running on pavement and doing some random races just for fun, and started getting better and better at them. I had no idea what I was doing, but I loved it. And I've also been just a huge nature lover since I was young and didn't know anything about trail running either. But I decided to try one day going on a trail and I just fell in love with it. I fell in love with the challenge, the terrain, the being in nature. I love hill running, the unpredictability. It's like the perfect mix of just being in nature and also trying new things.
Yeah, amazing. I think, some people, as you say, they either love it or they hate it, don't they, with running. But I think if you can get into it, it does give you so much about that being outdoors. And yeah, what it gives you is just amazing. And so were you doing competitive racing at that point? Did you get into that?
Yeah, I got into some competitive racing, placing. I did a lot of challenges, like trying to get FKTs on some of my local trails, things like that. Won a couple of times. I didn't do as much racing as I would have liked, I think, because I kept getting injured, which I now know was not injury, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Yep.
But yeah, so I got more into the competitive scene and was, running faster and faster times. And that was kind of an eye opener when I started not getting faster. And that which led me to kind of where I am today. A very long story short.
Yeah. Yeah. And so let's go there. Obviously, running was a big passion for you and a big part of your life. And um, is it right that you went to the doctor with pain in your IT band? Was
That was really the major start of the journey of figuring out what was wrong. Before that, I had struggled a lot with injuries or what I thought were injuries on and off for a long time. And it was very frustrating. And this is something I'm very passionate about advocating for because I was doing all the right things. I would say I was getting really smart with my mileage, not increasing too quickly, not doing anything risky. I was strength training, doing the
yeah.
PT, and I was getting an injury like every other week, no matter what I did. It was really, really frustrating and kept putting the halts on my running career. And I just kept dealing with that for years. And at the time, people were like, you just run too much or you're not eating enough, which were very valid concerns and I think should absolutely be evaluated, but that just wasn't my situation. And yeah, that really the kind of inflection point I would say was what I thought was IT band syndrome. I was visiting my partner in England at the time and I went for a run and about halfway through the run I developed a really sharp pain on the outside of my knee and ended up limping home. And the next day, it was still bothering me. The next week, it was still bothering me, and I couldn't run anymore. So I did all the things that you typically do for IT van syndrome. I went to the PT, I did the rehab, did as much glute strengthening as you could possibly do. I had really strong glutes. And it wasn't getting better. And I would run or at least try to run, and I would make it about a mile before my knee locked up on me and I couldn't run anymore. So after dealing with that, I think it was about 6 and 7 months of rehab that I really gave it a go before they decided to move forwards with some more in-depth investigation and did an MRI of my knee with contrast. And
Right.
instead of IT man syndrome, I found out that I had a bone tumor that was growing on the side of my knee and compressing the IT band. So, in a way, it was IT band syndrome, and that my IT band was very inflamed
Yeah.
because the bone tumor was compressing the nerves and the IT band.
I mean, IT band pain is so common in runners, isn't it? It's a very common injury. So I think there is a lot of people who exactly what you did. They go for physio, they try and get through it, and as you say, the glute exercises are
Yeah.
key ones that are recommended. But to then find out that you've got a tumor on the side of your knee, I mean, how did that feel hearing that news?
I will never forget hearing that news. I was at a Starbucks when I got the phone call, with the results, and I think they didn't wanna wait to tell me because at that point, everything was pretty urgent, to address, and they didn't want me to wait to come in, and they didn't know how long that was going to take, and I was actually had just finished up a doctor's appointment for my partner, because at the time, he was actually dealing with a cancer battle, and so it was a double a double whammy.
Wow.
So it was a really odd situation to say the least, and yeah, I was just drinking coffee outside of Starbucks when I got that phone call, and I didn't know what to do, I didn't know where to go, I just kind of sat there for a while being like, I have no idea what to do next," and they're telling you what the next steps are on the phone and what needs to be done and what's going to happen, and they're telling me, "You need to get into surgery within the next 2 weeks." and I'm just like, I can't. My partner's in chemotherapy. I can't do that, but I had to. I had no choice. Um, yeah, I was you kind of feel like you're living in a fever dream. And I will say I was really lucky. The outcome of the surgery, I mean, it was a really, really long road afterwards, but I got really lucky that there was no spread. They caught it early. It was precancerous, so it was growing at a really rapid rate. And removing it, fortunately, is all that's need to be done so far. And I'm on a monitoring list now. So I actually consider myself really lucky in that regard. But the surgery, I was in surgery 2 weeks later, and it was a really gnarly recovery, because it's not just it's not like an orthoscopic knee surgery where they just do the little needles. They had to remove part of my bone. Um, Now I just have a really gnarly scar on the back of my knee, but, in the end, I consider myself really fortunate, but it was really confusing at the time too as to how this could happen, how it had
Yeah.
been growing for so long, and that's why I'm really passionate also about, especially women advocating for themselves in the medical office because if I hadn't pressed them to do imaging, I never would have known, and I don't know where I would have been today.
I mean, that's so scary, isn't it? And thank goodness you did push to have the imaging done because, yeah, as you say, yeah, the kind of idea of what could have happened is quite scary, isn't it? So, I mean, I didn't even know that your partner was having chemo at the same time. So you're recovering from surgery, your partner's having chemo.
Mhm.
That must have been such a challenging time. How did you cope through that?
Not prettily. I would love to say that like I was positive and graceful and just looked right side and found my coping skills. But even as a psychologist, I was really messy. I did not cope well. I wasn't taking care of myself. I would say, it was really a grin and bear it. It was just a season of life that, you had no choice but to get through. And I think the only way was just through by any means necessary. And it was ugly. I'm really grateful. I have very good friends, a really solid friend group that were really supportive, but it was a lonely time, a hard time. Um, and it was just one foot in front of the other. There was no magic trick. There was no solid coping skills that I wish I could offer at that time.
No.
But sometimes you're just faced with these circumstances, and the only thing you can do is just keep going, and that's the only way out. And that was definitely what that was.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. One step at a time for sure. And so recovery from that, i- was it physio and aim to get back to running? And was that
Yeah,
your focus?
yeah. My goal pretty much immediately after the surgery was when can I run again? And, I really hoped that it would be a straightforward progression. It was not. Now I know why. That was just the beginning of the journey, and I did a lot of different therapies. I did PT, I was doing chiropractic, massage therapy, shockwave therapy, because it was such a major surgery, and like, there was a lot of complications, there were issues with my nerves afterwards, and a lot of retaining inflammation that took a really long time to calm down, and I was finally able to run again. It was about a year later, after the surgery, so it took a really long time, and was really messy, and now I know why, because there was a lot of lingering inflammatory problems.
Yes. So let's come on to that then, because we kind of touched on it in that there's reasons on reflection, you now know why you were getting these injuries and recovery wasn't as smooth sailing
Yeah.
as you'd have hoped it to be. So do you want to just talk us through what happened and from that point?
Yeah, so I guess the long story short is I kept having issues. The recovery wasn't smooth. My inflammation wasn't going away and other things started popping up. I started getting fevers pretty regularly, random rashes pretty regularly, and was exhausted all the time. At the time, they told me I'm just pushing too hard. I was a grad student. I was in a PhD program during my surgery, during all of this. And so they were just like, you're just doing too much, which was fair. I don't disagree. But they also weren't looking any further, which I was like, you don't get just fevers and all of these symptoms from being stressed out. And sometimes the body does shut down, but it was persistent. I was lowering my stress levels. I was doing all the things and nothing was working. And I would run and I would get hurt the next week. And then the next week I'd be fine. And then I would be hurt the next week. And it just kept happening, this cycle that I had been in before the bone tumor came back. And then one day I went for a run and my back spasmed after the run. And I was like, that was okay. That was weird. I don't normally struggle with back spasms, fortunately. And the next morning I couldn't get out of bed.
Wow.
And the pain was just so severe that, there was nothing I could do. I couldn't walk. Um, and by the
Gosh.
time I finally made it to a doctor, they were like, you have a stress fracture in your pelvis. And it was just a guess, because they didn't do any imaging. They were just like, "You just run so much." And I was like, "I really don't run that much." Compared, like, yes, I run more, I would say, than the average person, but I was probably sitting at around 40 miles a week, maybe less because I was in a PhD program, so I was kind of inconsistent with my running at that point because school
Yeah.
was taking up so much of my time. And I was like, "It just doesn't make sense. I don't understand. I'm not overtraining. I don't understand where this would come from." And they're like, "You just run too much. You just run too much." And, yeah, they did imaging 3 weeks later. There was no stress fracture. There was not like, nothing. I still could barely walk. I couldn't make it up the stairs. And I just didn't have any answers. Their only response was just, "Stop running, it's not good for you." And I think that's a lot of doctors' responses is, "Stop running, it's not good for you, it's bad for your knees, it's bad for your joints." I was like, "That doesn't make any sense, I'm running less than I ever have when this happened. Why would this happen now?" And eventually, I think it was after a year of rotating through doctors. I mean, the first rheumatologist that I saw told me, sometimes the brain plays tricks on you. And, especially with women, you think you're in pain, but really you're not. And I was like,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um and I just was like, this is not a trick. My brain is not playing a trick on me. You can't just not walk. That doesn't happen.
No, that's
Uh,
extreme kind
yeah.
of reaction, isn't it? But
Yeah.
wow.
And
Okay.
I saw 2 more rheumatologists. Finally, the 3rd rheumatologist did an autoimmune panel, and I lit up like a Christmas tree. Like, every single autoimmune test was coming back positive and off the charts. Um, and that became a whole other investigation.
I've been wearing Luca's cycling kit for around a year now, and it's genuinely benefited my training so much. Luca is a premium women's cycling wear brand created by women for women. Born from the frustration of ill-fitting gear and the outdated shrink it and pink it approach, Luca is here to set a new standard. For performance, for design, and for women, their pieces are made to move with you. Crafted in Portugal from high-performance Italian fabrics, tested by a community of female cyclists, and worn by GB athletes like Sian Rainsley. It's more than cycling wear. It's a movement towards empowerment, confidence, and redefining what women's sportswear should be. I've personally found Luca kit to be unbelievably comfortable, and particularly on those longer rides. But also, it looks amazing and is super functional. It really does motivate me to get out on my bike. As a listener of this podcast, you can use my code ToughestFinishLine to get a little something off your first order at rideluca.com. I mean, you hear about people not being listened to by doctors, and I could not do a doctor's job for sure because there are so many options of things that it could be. But to put it off on it's a woman's brain over responding is quite an extreme response, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I mean, that I can only begin to imagine how hard that must be when, I mean, you physically cannot walk, and when you've been such a big avid runner and you're being told it's not this, it's this, it's this, it's this. I mean, how did you keep going at that time?
I think I just had to trust my gut because at the end of the day, I just truly believe like, I just knew in my gut that there was something else going on, that this couldn't just be it. And I always tell people, and especially women, trust your instincts, like, we have
Yeah.
them for a reason. If something is wrong, if you think something is wrong, there probably is. And, I'm for as a psychologist, I'm the first to, advocate for the mind body connection. I know that pain is something that is complex and not as simple as just tissue damage and that the brain plays a role. But I also know that when you have so many things going on, all of these symptoms going on, that, you're doing all the things, you're checking all the boxes, you're looking at your journey, and you can scientifically understand that what you're going through doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense, and there's probably another explanation.
Yeah.
And I just had to trust that instinct that there was something else going on, um, and keep fighting.
Yeah. And thank goodness you did. So, yes, autoimmune. You, as you said, you lit up like a Christmas tree in terms of flagging for that. For people who don't know then, because is it right, you've been diagnosed with multiple autoimmune diseases. What exactly is that and what impact does that have on your body?
Yeah, so I have 3 autoimmune diseases as well as something called mast cell activation syndrome, which is a histamine condition. It's not technically an autoimmune disease, it's a histamine response. Um, which is complicated to explain, but it's a syndrome, it's a different type of condition. And then the 3 autoimmune diseases I have are systemic lupus, inflammatory bowel disease, and a spinal disease called ankylosing spondylitis, which I will probably just refer to as AS because it's really hard to say.
Quite technical. So, yeah, lots going on there. And so, how does that affect your body on a day to day basis? Because seeing your Instagram and what you go through, there's lots going on. And I've seen your stories where you're getting medications out the fridge. How does it impact on your body on a day to day basis?
Yeah, so it's really complicated for me because although oftentimes autoimmune diseases can coexist, my unique set of diseases are not normally comorbid. They're really, really rare, to the point where I think there's about 10 people, like, in the United States, diseases altogether, because they're different pathways. They don't normally coexist, and the treatment for one typically makes the other worse. So, it's never straightforward, and a lot of treatments that I've tried don't work or have made things worse for me. So, with, lupus, for example, lupus typically is more of an organ involvement, so inflammatory organ disease, skin disease is typically what lupus affects. And it does affect like joint pain and stuff like that, but I would say the main pathways are more of like systemic, full body inflammation, organ involvement. Ankylosing spondylitis is a progressive spinal disease in nature. That was the back pain that I was having. It causes sacroiliitis and a lot of joint pain. I have arthritis in most of my joints at this point. Um, so that is primarily like a joint disease, and then also affects your eyes as well. Um, And then inflammatory bowel disease is inflammation of your GI tract. It's different from irritable bowel syndrome, which is primarily stress related, whereas inflammatory bowel disease means there's like actual inflammation in the gut, and the gut lining and the organs in the gut. Um, so every part of my body is affected, I
Yeah.
would say, with the combination of all of these diseases. Um, and it's really, really complicated because again, yeah, the treatment is not straightforward.
I mean, yeah, it's hard enough when you have one, let alone three, which the medications impact the other one, and yeah, that just must be a minefield for you, yeah, having to deal with that on a day-to-day basis. And yeah, I mean, your Instagram just blew me away with what you were going through. But I think the thing that it just inspired me is that despite all of that and so many hospital trips and pain that you are in, you're still out running. You're still you're still out there. You're still, aiming for different events. And I know you were aiming for Run Disney. Is that right?
Yes, I was, and that was one of the biggest heartbreaks in my life was pulling out of that race. I still would love to do that again. It was a freak it was a freak incident that happened like 3 days before. It seems like one of my injections caused a really negative response and caused like one of my hips to swell up. It caused a hematoma in my hip. So it was bruised and very swollen. So I had to pull out of the race. And that was like 3 days before the event. So that was really hard. R- Running a Disneyland race is or a Disney World race is one of my biggest dreams. So I would love to be able to do that one day. Um if anyone has anyone any connections to Run Disney, please let me know.
We will
Part
share this far and wide. We will try and get you there.
um, but yeah, so I still my mom used to say that I'm stubborn, and that yeah, that much is very true. I'm very, very stubborn, and I love running, and I'm not giving it up anytime soon. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And it was just your attitude despite all that you go through medically, and as I said, the pain that you're in and the different treatments that you are having to work through, you still just get up and go. And the thing that I loved about you is that you didn't hide the truth of your medical difficulties and what you're going through. It's a very real um display of what you go through, and I think that's often what people miss out is they see somebody, I've just done this and it appears easy, but it's not easy. And I think that's the thing that is so inspiring. And with Run Disney, and I know it's your biggest heartbreak, as you say, but actually the inspiration that I'm sure has given so many people to just keep fighting and keep going despite everything. I hope you can take that away as some positive from what is a heartbreaking situation for you.
I appreciate that.
No, it definitely is. It is so inspiring. So you are still running, and by the sounds of it, we're gonna try and get you to Run Disney for it. But you're still getting out and about, and how do you find the running helps you with everything you have going on?
Yeah, I think, speaking to your earlier point, uh, th I do try to show the reality of it on social media because I think the reason I started my social media is when this first started happening to me, I felt so alone
Yeah.
in this position of struggling with these diseases, but not wanting to be the disease. I felt like I kept coming across people with chronic illness, and I totally get it because this was me too, where it's like you just become the disease. The disease is all that you are. And my life is consumed by my diseases, but there's also a difference between that and letting it be who you are. And I wanted to show like there has to be a middle ground between, yes, I am dealing with this and it's hard, and these diseases are killing me figuratively and literally, uh, but it's also not who I am. It's not everything that I am. Um, but running movement reminds me who I am. It's who I was before I got sick. It's still who I am. And it's not everything that I am. There are multiple parts of me. But, when you live with chronic illness, when you live with depression, anxiety, anything that makes the world dark, movement becomes something that is so much bigger than exercise. It becomes proof that the darkness isn't everything that you are, that it's not an endpoint, because with running, you're always going to go through dark points and you come out the other side. And I think that is such an important reminder for people with chronic illness, with mental illness, with grief, with burnout, with any number of things that you have going on. I mean, it teaches you that you can move through pain, you can move through hard moments and come out the other side. And I think also just on a physical level, movement does make me feel better. You have to be really careful, and I've learned, and I don't always get it right, and I try to
Yeah.
show that too. Sometimes I fuck up, pardon my
Yeah.
language. But and I push too hard, and then I have to take a step back, and that's a really hard lesson because you're not always going to be perfect. But I'm not someone who can run every single day. I don't know that I'll ever be the girl that used to run 60-mile weeks, but there is, at the end of the day, oftentimes something I can do. Sometimes I can walk. Like, that's awesome. I can hike, I cycle, I swim. I've become a very diversified athlete.
Yeah.
And I find that, like, a body in motion really does stay in motion, whether that's strength training or swimming or cycling or hopefully running, because that's my favorite. Um, it really does make me feel physically better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's that mental side as well as the physical side as well, as long as you don't overdo it. And I imagine it is it that, some days you can cope with things very well, and then the next day you could do the same thing and your body just says, Nope, not today."
Yeah, absolutely. And the uncertainty of it is something that I'm still learning to cope with. I think that is one of the hardest realities that I've had to face. Last week I felt good running this amount. This week I can't do that. And that it's like a little mini heartbreak to have to of just last week I was fine. Just yesterday I was fine. Just this morning I felt good. And now I'm sitting on the bathroom floor. What happened in those 3 hours? You can track your symptoms like crazy, and I always encourage that. See if you can find consistencies with your flare ups so you can understand how to prevent them, but you're not going to get it right all the time, and things are going to happen, and it's really, really hard. I try to make it clear too that I'm not positive all the time. I try to stay positive because I just try, but I do break down. I grieve the uncertainty. I get scared of what my future might look like, but I do my best not to live my life there. Um, because that's just not a way to live. This body is all that I have. This is the life I was given. This life is all there is. Every day is all there is. I don't get to trade it in. I don't get to, there's no take back seas. I don't, there's nothing I can do. So, why not use what you have? Why not do what you can? Why not chase the things that matter to me while I still can? Because I don't know what the future holds. The treatments could not work, and it may be that I don't get to walk in 10 years. So why wouldn't I use today while I can? Why wouldn't I go for that walk today? I often think about that quote by Mary Oliver, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? This isn't the wild and precious life that I wanted. I'll be honest with you. If I'm not going to be like, I'm thankful for my chronic illness. I'm sorry, I'm not.
No.
I can't be that person. I'm not thankful. And I think that's okay.
Absolutely.
To not be thankful for every bad thing that has happened to you. I think that's such a good mindset to have, and I wish I could be there. But instead, I just try to come from the place of like, what is it you plan to do with this one wild and precious life that you got? This is what you have. This is the lot in life that I was given. And maybe what I plan to do today is I got out of bed and went for a walk. That's what I'm gonna do with my one wild and precious life today, and that's something. That's better than nothing. That's better than staying in bed. It's better than being, you know, accepting that, a disease is all that I am. So that's what I have that day.
Yeah, yeah, and I think I love that it's about not letting the disease define who you are. It's obviously a big part of your life, and it is you, but it doesn't define who you are. And I love that quote so much. That one life that you get, what are you going to do with it, and where are you going to take it? And the cards that you've been dealt are pretty brutal in many respects, but I guess it's maybe about switching that you've had to switch that thinking from chasing that PB and chasing that medal or whatever it was to that medal may just be getting out of bed that day.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and so obviously it's going day by day, but you're still working, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, still working. My everything is in my life has just turned a bit chaotic, but I was in academia for most of my life. I was a psychologist. I did psychological research and I loved that part of my life, but with the new administration, my grant and funding was cut because I worked on diversity and equality efforts and mental health efforts for unique populations. I am a queer woman, and most of my efforts were centered on helping queer women and Hispanic women like myself and women of color. Um, but with the new administration, my grant funding was cut. So I did a complete career pivot.
Wow.
So yeah, and I'm actually a certified professional dog trainer. So that's the job that I do now, and I'm doing right now. And then I just started my own business. I just left kind of a corporate dog training job to start my own business, and that's what I'm doing now.
Wow. Again, I
Wow.
didn't know that about you. What a change of direction,
Yeah.
but again, it's doing something that you're clearly very passionate about, and despite all that you have going on, you're setting up your own business and having that career is just something else. So, I mean, fair play to you with doing it and keeping going. You are definitely not letting all the things that you have going on define who you are. And so I know it must be really challenging to plan and to put goals in place, but do you have races that you're working towards at the moment? Obviously, Run
Yeah.
Disney is one that's on the list, which hopefully one day, but is there anything else you're working towards?
Run Disney is definitely one of my biggest goals. Whatever, I don't know what the next one would be or what that looks like. I think, yeah, that's one of the hardships that I have is not being able to plan for races because I never know when a flare up is going to occur. And that's something I would love for the industry to change. I don't think the industry takes that into account. And I really advocate for that change because oftentimes races don't offer deferrals or injury waivers. And I think there needs to be exceptions that need to be made for people that have autoimmune conditions or something else going on because disability is part of equality and inclusion efforts, and it's so unacknowledged in the running world. And I can't sign up for any races because if a flare up happens, I won't get my money back, and I'm not in a financial position where I can afford that. Um, but races never include those policies. They're like, well, technically, it's an injury, and you just overtrained. That's not the case.
No.
And there's so many people like me who have to live with that uncertainty and lose money and don't get the chance to sign up for races because it's too risky. It's too financially risky. So that being said, that's a change that I would like to see in the
Yeah.
running industry. Right now, I've set some smaller goals, some personal goals. My main goal right now is just getting back to trail running. Obviously, trail running is a lot more dynamic than just road running and requires, full use of my body and different muscles. So I'm working on getting stronger right now, building a more resilient body so that way I can get back to trail running because I would love to get back to trail racing.
Yeah, and just having that one goal, I imagine must just keep you going and pushing as much as you can. And it's a really good point that I've kind of been thinking about since doing this podcast, because we've had so we had Ashley Norton on, who has multiple sclerosis, and I know she has the same battles, that her body with flare-ups and things massively impacts on her ability to race. And I know she's recently had to pull out of a race due to a flare-up. It's a really valid point that your money then is completely just lost. And wouldn't it be amazing if we could get that changed? And I mean, hopefully, because there's changes that are happening, a lot of races are now changing their rules that if they fall pregnant, then they can defer to the next year. So
Yeah.
fingers crossed, there might be room for some negotiation and things. But maybe
Yeah.
we'll put that out there to try and get some change happening to support athletes as much as we can. But yeah, I love that as a goal, to get back to trail running and get back to your roots, isn't it? To where you first started out. Uh,
Exactly.
and so, just to finish, then we always finish on the question of what advice would you give to somebody who might be, whether it's not necessarily the same conditions, as you mentioned, yours are quite rare, but somebody who may be going through similar to what you are going through right now. What advice would you give them?
I would tell them that you are not what has happened to you. You are not what you are going through. You are not your circumstances. You are not the darkness that you're surrounded by. You have to remember that you are the person that overcomes the darkness. You are the person that sees that darkness and chooses to keep going. And if you can ground yourself in that sort of strength, ground yourself in who you really are, which is someone who has faced unimaginable things, horrible things, and still managed to come out the other side and still managed to do amazing things, has still managed to pull themselves up again and again. If you can lean into that, you are going to get so much further than if you were to lean into the darkness and lean into the fear. And I know it's easier. It's so much easier said than done to not get into that. And I want to remind people that, if for a day you have to lean into the darkness, that's okay. Please forgive yourself for that. Don't be hard on yourself for breaking down, for grieving, for having a hard time for what you're going through. You don't have to be positive all the time. But maybe the next week, then you try again, you know? Keep trying again and again and again. And also trust yourself. You've overcome every hard thing that has happened to you. You've overcome dark moments in races. You've overcome dark moments in training cycles. Life is no different. You can overcome this too. And maybe it's not going to be glamorous and it's not going to be pretty and you're not going to be who you were when you get to the other side, but no one ever is. And no one ever is the same person when they finish a race from when they start. You've become a different person over that training cycle. You got to meet yourself where you're at.
I love that. You should go into motivational speaking, Maggie. Yeah. You would definitely, I could listen to you all day in
Oh my
terms
gosh, you're
of
so
just cheering people on. And yeah, I know your story has already brought so many people some clarity and inspiration going forward. And so, how can people follow your story if they've listened today and want to see where you go next and what you do? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, I think, following my Instagram, mags.run, is I'm honestly not that great at social media, to be honest. I've been on social media for almost a year now, but Instagram is the only platform that I have right now. I do have some really exciting things in the works to create a larger community for people like me, people who are dealing with really hard circumstances, are facing really hard things. And it doesn't need to be autoimmune disease. I think we all have our own battles and they elicit the same emotions, the same hardships. And, I'm not here to play who has it harder Olympics. I want to create a community where people can come together and remind each other of of how strong we are despite all of those things. So, yeah, I have some announcements coming on my Instagram soon to start those communities, and I'm really excited about that.
What a teaser, hey? I love that. No, that sounds incredible, and definitely we can share that because I know a lot of our listeners on this podcast. It's what it's all about is people who are going through incredibly tough and challenging circumstances, but how you can use that to get you to some incredible finish lines. So, yeah, so I'm sure lots of people will be following you, and we will keep following your story. And yes, if there's anything we can share that can help people, then do let us know. But Maggie, thank you so much for your time today. We are so grateful, and keep doing what you're doing on your social media because it's refreshing seeing the brutal truth of what you're going through, but also how you're coming through that and what you're doing. And yeah, we'll tag Run Disney, so hopefully we can get you to Run Disney. There's no magic wand, but you never know what can come from it. But
We
thank
all
you
need a little
so
bit of
much.
magic in our lives, I think, now more than
Absolutely.
ever.
Absolutely. Maggie, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.